Tonight, a monster snowstorm blankets the East Coast, one of the biggest in years.
We were just stranded all night long. Nobody was moving.
I'm Jeff Glor. We'll show you the effect this wintry wallop is having on both travel and shopping on this critical final weekend before Christmas. Also, it's a deal. Senate Democrats say they've reached an agreement to get the 60 votes needed to get a health reform plan passed.
This is the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor.
And good evening. We begin tonight with a wall of white. People up and down the East Coast are looking at what could be an historic storm for the month of December. That storm is sweeping through the mid-Atlantic states right now, up through New York, and should be in New England by morning. 2 feet of snow fell in parts of the Carolinas, and Washington, D.C. can expect much of the same. A foot or more is forecast for Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. We have correspondents standing by all along the storm's path tonight, and we begin with Bob Orr, who's in Washington. Bob?
Jeff, Washington is smack dab in the middle of a zone of misery that stretches from the Carolinas all the way up into New England. It's been snowing here since 9 o'clock last night, sometimes at the astonishing rate of 4 inches an hour. In parts of D.C., we now have 2 feet of snow, and it's still snowing.
The massive winter storm arrived overnight just before the president did, as he returned on Air Force One from the Global Warming Summit in Denmark. By daybreak, conditions were only getting worse. Blowing snow made the White House virtually invisible from just a few blocks away. The U.S. Capitol was open for business as staffers and senators trudged to a rare Saturday session, but not much else was moving. And those who tried to venture out,
I feel like I'm dancing with my car right now.
It's just slipping all over the place.
Yes, it's really bad.
Major highways throughout the mid-Atlantic states remain snow-covered and in some places impassable, despite the best efforts of road crews.
It's bad way people just park their cars in the middle of the road. We can't get the roads pushed. We can't work them.
As snow totals topped a foot, accidents became too numerous to count, and blizzard conditions reduced the visibility to zero. Look at this traffic camera shot of Interstate 95, the busiest East Coast freeway. And here's the Capitol Beltway, clogged today not by traffic, but by blowing and drifting snow. And trains are also sidetracked. The D.C. Metro system has shut down all above-ground stations. Even the Smithsonian museums have been knocked out by the pre-winter punch.
We're closed today.
The monster storm has also cut power to more than 350,000 customers in 7 states. West Virginia is the hardest hit. 166,000 customers are without electricity. And things could still get worse as the record-setting storm spins north.
Historically, this will go down as probably the biggest snowstorm ever in Washington, D.C. for December, and it's probably a top 5 storm for Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. of all time.
Even the most dependable are finding the going tough sledding, and drifting snow overnight means tomorrow could be just as challenging. Still, some see a reason to smile.
At least we'll have a white Christmas in the D.C. area.
And it could get a whole lot whiter. We're now told another storm is brewing that will bring more bad weather potentially by Christmas Eve. Jeff?
All right, Bob Orr in wintry Washington tonight. Bob, thank you. The travel problems Bob talked about are spreading rapidly all over the Northeast this evening. So Randall Pinkston is at New York's LaGuardia Airport this evening. Randall, good evening to you.
Hello, Jeff. Well, despite extensive preparations by airports and by airlines, the storm has already disrupted travel up and down the East Coast. And worst of all, forecasters say the storm has hours to go before it's over. The blizzard from the south spread travel mayhem up the East Coast and beyond. Heavy snow shut down Reagan National Airport in Washington and BWI in Baltimore. American and American Eagle dropped 195 flights. United canceled 500. Delta Northwest over 500 flights. As maintenance crews fought to clear runways, holiday travelers fought their way to airports and waited for the storm to pass. At LaGuardia Airport in New York, Jamie LaRille and Alicia Torres were trying to get back home to Louisiana after a shopping trip. When is your flight supposed to leave?
It was supposed to leave tonight.
And when is it going to leave?
Monday.
Monday?
Monday morning.
The most dramatic travel problems were on the road, especially in West Virginia and Virginia, areas not accustomed to heavy snowfall. In Virginia, National Guard troops rescued 100 motorists on Interstate 81 and took them to shelters. In West Virginia, where the governor declared a state of emergency, hundreds of motorists were trapped along I-77.
I've been driving since 12 o'clock yesterday, but I've been at a dead still stop since 6 o'clock yesterday evening.
Robin Hooter was one of those stuck on I-77. When we reached her by cell phone, her 9-hour trip from Ohio to North Carolina had already stretched into 26 hours.
From 4 o'clock yesterday evening till about 10 o'clock this morning, I moved maybe 10 miles.
As the storm moves north, traffic experts are urging motorists to be cautious.
It really would be best if you could delay your trip until after these storm conditions pass. That would be best.
Despite the weather, AAA expects nearly 88 million Americans to travel across the holidays. That's a 4% increase over last year, weather or not. Jeff?
All right, Randall Pinkston at LaGuardia this evening. Randall, thank you. Today is known as Super Saturday, normally the busiest shopping day of the year. But the question is, what effect will a storm have on that? Manuel Gallegos is in Times Square this evening. Manny?
Well, Jeff, forget Super Saturday. Here in the East, it's Snowy Saturday, and retail experts say this storm is going to knock out business by about 10%.
It was definitely shop before the snow drops across the stormy East.
I'm trying to rush home before the snow comes.
In the Washington, D.C. area, mall retailers counting on a crowd were
very nervous. The weather's terrible. Like I said, it's the biggest shopping day of the year for us.
Some of the nation's biggest retailers will take a direct hit from the weather. 36% of TJ Maxx and Marshall stores are in snow-affected areas, 31% for Target and Saks.
Until now, holiday sales were actually up for retailers, jumping 18% last week from the week before, and overall about 1.5% higher than last year. Around the country, stores are still counting on last-minute purchases to help raise their bottom line, especially since most shoppers say they aren't even halfway finished with their gift buying. 42 million haven't even started.
Were you more careful with money this year?
Definitely.
Money is tight, and they're holding out for lower prices.
I had a budget, of course. You know, with the recession on, I had to have a budget on.
But consumers looking for deep discounts or mountains of unsold merchandise like last year will likely be disappointed.
Retailers have designed a plan they can be profitable with less inventory at lower prices.
One retail group in New York was measuring sales this year the old-fashioned way, counting shopping bags.
And while sales in the stores may be slower, online shopping is expected to get a boost. But of course, it's going to cost extra if you want those gifts delivered in time for Christmas. Jeff?
All right, Manuel Gallegos in Times Square tonight. Manny, welcome to New York. As Bob Orr mentioned earlier, weather and politics collided this morning on Capitol Hill. Democrats tonight say they finally have the votes to pass the health care reform bill. Our White House correspondent Chip Reed has details.
It's not often that senators arrive at the Capitol before 7 a.m. on a Saturday during a blizzard. But with health care reform on the line, they opened a high-stakes session with all eyes on Nebraska Democrat Ben Nelson, who finally ended the suspense.
I intend to vote for cloture and vote for health care reform.
That gave Senate Democrats the 60 votes they'll need to pass the bill before Christmas. Nelson, a strong opponent of abortion, said the breakthrough was new language intended to ensure that government health care subsidies will not be used to pay for abortions. He was also promised tens of millions of dollars in Medicaid funds for Nebraska, a deal Republicans say is little more than a taxpayer-funded bribe. President Obama hailed the development.
After a nearly century-long struggle, we are on the cusp of making health care reform a reality.
He called the Senate bill the largest deficit reduction plan in years, noting that the Congressional Budget Office now says it will reduce the deficit by $132 billion over the next decade. The bill would also expand health insurance to 31 million Americans with the help of government subsidies, prohibit insurance companies from denying coverage because of pre-existing conditions or dropping coverage if someone gets sick. It does not include a public option, infuriating many liberals. The bill would be paid for by cutting nearly $500 billion from Medicare, taxing expensive insurance plans, and other tax hikes, including a new one on people who use tanning salons.
This bill is a legislative train wreck of historic
proportions. Republicans fiercely oppose the bill, insisting it's loaded with hidden tax hikes and will massively increase government spending. The only Republican who was even considering voting yes now says there's no chance.
Well, the concern is it really expands the role of government.
As the day dragged on and snow piled up outside the Capitol, Republicans, desperate to slow the process down, even forced the reading of a 383-page amendment.
By the percentage increase in the MEI as defined in Section 1842.
That took more than 7 hours, but Democrats say they're still on track to pass this bill by Christmas Eve. They'll then come back in January and try to work out their differences with the House, and that will be especially difficult on the issue of abortion. Jeff?
All right, our chief White House correspondent Chip Reid this evening. Chip, thank you. Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, at the end of this difficult year, the recession's impact on 4 families who live on the same block. When we talk about the economy and our current recession, we use big, long-established numbers. The unemployment rate, gross domestic product, the Dow Jones average. But ultimately, those numbers affect people on a small scale in very real ways all across this country. And that is the focus of tonight's Weekend Journal. As we enter 2010, a visit to one block in one American town to see how 4 families are coping.
I haven't seen fear like this about money in my entire lifetime.
Jen Singer lives on an upper middle class block in central New Jersey. But these days, 6 of her 15 neighbors are out of work.
We don't feel like the recession is over here on my street.
Jen is a freelance writer. Her husband Pete still brings home a steady paycheck, but they're playing it safe this holiday season, spending less and saving more.
What's to drink? There's water, and there's water. The other day I got a package. It had some tissue paper in it. I actually took it out and put it upstairs and thought, my God, I'm turning into my grandmother.
A few doors down, the Davins are down to 1 salary. Brian Davin lost his job last spring. Grace Davin works from home. But with 4 college-bound kids and a hefty mortgage, money is tight. How much of this do the kids understand?
I think the older ones really get it.
They end up buying their own school clothes this year with their own babysitting money.
Without extra money for entertainment, they're spending more time together at home, chipping in on little chores like painting signs for Cub Scouts or creating a home theater.
It's turned into something fun that the kids have enjoyed. We've done family movie nights now. And the kids love it. They're like, this is great. Can we do this again next week?
But the grinding reality is the job hunt is tough, and a near miss can really sting.
Well, it's hard to watch when you see your husband getting excited and then he gets a phone call that it wasn't, he wasn't chosen, and it's got to be disappointing for him, and you feel for him.
Next-door neighbor Bob Schroet saw his job loss as an opportunity. After 28 years in corporate America, he dug into his savings and bought a toy store. It's changed your job, it's changed your family, changed your marriage, it's changed everything.
Yes, very much so.
It was a bold move, especially since the layoff, he says, felt like a seismic event.
There was a moment of a lot of disbelief on my part when it did happen. And
after 28 years.
Yes, it's hard to believe. And it really rips your soul out and takes your identity away for a period of time.
Bob's wife, Janet, was a stay-at-home mother. Now she's still in charge of the house and kids.
And they should begin any day, yeah.
But she's also a full-time partner in the business.
I have zero downtime.
And zero time just for yourself.
I have no time for myself at all anymore. Any free time I have, if my kids are awake, I try to spend time with them because I have the mom guilt now.
Across the street, Aisha and Anthony Locasio are both working, but it's been a year of constant anxiety.
How you doing? Sometimes I find myself waking up in the middle of the night and, wow, what if this happens? And that's when I have to calm down and just focus one day at a time.
I think back to my grandmother. When I was younger, I used to look at how she would pinch every penny. She'd dilute the soaps, and I'm kind of starting to think in those ways now.
Parenting will be less competitive if you can't afford to put your kid on the $5,000 ice hockey team that sends them to Canada every other weekend. Maybe that's a good thing.
Our parents did this with twice as many children as we did, or more. And they made it happen. When you hear the stories of other families that are in much more difficult situations than you are, you can't help but say, you know what, we can get through this.
The current unemployment rate is 10%. Most economists believe it will take 5 years before the economy returns to a normal unemployment rate of 5%. Overseas today, Pope Benedict moved two of his predecessors a step closer to possible sainthood. He approved decrees recognizing so-called heroic virtues in both Pope John Paul II and, more controversially, in Pius XII, who has been criticized for not doing enough to stop the Holocaust. We'll be right back. Now updating our lead story tonight, the first major storm of the season on the East Coast, one that could dump 2 feet or more of snow in some spots. Rescuers are trying to reach up to 1,000 people trapped in their vehicles on Interstate 81 in Virginia. More than 1,000 flights have been canceled at airports. And the nation's capital, including the White House, had the look of a holiday card today. That is the CBS Evening News tonight. Later on CBS, 48 Hours Mystery. Russ Mitchell will be here tomorrow night. I'm Jeff Glor, CBS News in New York. Stay warm. Good night.